It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I had just finished a long day at work, eager to get home and spend some time with my wife, Emma. But what I walked into that evening was something I'll never forget. As I turned the corner, heading toward our driveway, I noticed something strange. Her car was parked by the side of the road, but something wasn't right. There, in the dim light of the street lamps, I saw a familiar car I hadn't expected to see, her boss's. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to take a closer look. My heart pounded in my chest as I moved toward the car, only to stop dead in my tracks when I saw them. Emma, my wife, was sitting in the passenger seat, her hands all over her boss. They were in the middle of a heated embrace, and it was clear they were more than just colleagues. The way they looked at each other, the closeness, the touches, it was more than I could process in the moment. Just as my mind was trying to make sense of what I was seeing, Emma noticed me. Her face turned pale, and she immediately pulled away. But it was too late. Her boss, still in his seat, barely blinked before turning to me and said, without any shame, "It's your wife's choice." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the cold indifference in his voice that crushed me. The man I trusted to guide her at work had crossed a line I never thought possible. It felt like a lifetime ago, but I still remember the day we first met like it was yesterday. It wasn't a dramatic love story. There were no grand gestures, no instant sparks. It was something much quieter, much more real. I had been traveling on a late-night train to visit my family, a routine journey I had taken countless times. But that night, the train was packed. Every seat was taken, and I found myself standing in the aisle, holding on to a pole as the train rocked back and forth. And then, there she was. Emma. She was sitting by the window, a book in hand, her eyes focused on the pages, but every now and then she would look up, glancing out at the dark night. Our eyes met for the first time when I accidentally bumped into her seat. She smiled, a soft, gentle smile, and apologized for making room for me. It was such a small moment, but it felt like the start of something. We ended up talking for hours that night, about everything and nothing. I told her about my work, my life, my dreams. She shared hers too. I learned that she loved traveling, exploring new places, and had a passion for photography. I was drawn to her intelligence, her kindness, and the way she seemed to understand me, even when I wasn't sure what I was saying. By the time we reached our destination, I didn't want the conversation to end. We exchanged numbers, and it wasn't long before we started seeing each other. Our first date was simple, a coffee at a small cafe, but it felt like we had known each other forever. As the weeks turned into months, we grew closer. Emma and I shared a bond that felt unbreakable, and I knew that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. A year later, we were married in a small ceremony with just close friends and family. It was everything we had dreamed of, simple, intimate, and full of love. Our life together was far from perfect, but we made it work. We built our little world, a cozy home filled with laughter, love, and occasional arguments over silly things. But through it all, we were a team. We traveled together, built careers, and supported each other in every way. Emma was my best friend, the person I trusted most in this world. Until that night, when everything came crashing down. Our life together had always seemed perfect. Emma and I had our ups and downs, sure, but like any couple, we always worked things out. But somewhere along the way, I started to notice little things I didn't want to acknowledge at first. There were late nights at work, longer hours for her, and more business trips she had to take. At first, I told myself it was just part of her career, something she had to do for her future. I was proud of her ambition and independence, But as time passed, the small signs became harder to ignore. She was distracted more often, lost in thought, her attention somewhere else when we spent time together. Our conversations felt surface level, like she was hiding something just beneath the surface. I started to feel like I was losing the woman I had once felt so connected to. And then there were the little things that kept happening. Her phone was always on silent, and whenever I walked into the room, she'd quickly hide her screen or change the subject. I tried to convince myself that I was just overthinking things. Maybe I was just too focused on the negative, projecting my insecurities onto her. But the nagging feeling in the back of my mind wouldn't go away. It was as if I could feel her slipping away, even if she didn't want to admit it. Still, I never imagined anything like what I saw that night. I never thought she would betray me like that, openly, in front of my own eyes with my best friend. The truth came crashing down so hard, I didn't know how to process it. All the doubts I had built up over the past few months suddenly made sense. I wasn't imagining things. There had been something going on between them all along. I had always trusted Emma, and I had trusted Mark too. We had been friends for years, shared countless memories together. The idea that they had been hiding something from me, that they could betray me like this, shattered everything. My heart was racing as I stood there, unable to move, watching them both. My mind screamed at me, trying to make sense of the scene in front of me. The disbelief was overwhelming, and the words, "It's your wife's choice," still echoed in my mind over and over. Mark, my best friend, who I had trusted like a brother, had just stood there, unapologetic, as if what he had done didn't matter. And Emma, my wife, the woman I thought I knew, just stood there, looking at me like she didn't know how to explain herself. It was Emma who finally spoke first, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for this to happen, but it's true. I've been seeing him behind your back. It was a mistake, but I felt something was missing. I didn't know how to fix it." Her words cut through me like a knife, but it was the emptiness in her eyes that truly shattered me. She wasn't even sorry for what had happened. She was sorry that she got caught. Mark, who had been watching the scene unfold with an almost indifferent expression, finally looked at me. "It's her choice, man," he repeated, his voice cold and detached. "I didn't force her into anything. We've been together for a while now. You were too busy to notice. It just happened." The anger that surged through me wasn't even a conscious decision. It was pure instinct. How could they both stand there, acting like this was just some misunderstanding? I had spent years with Emma, building a life together, only for her to betray me with him. And yet, here he was, the man who had been my closest friend, treating it like it was nothing. I couldn't take it anymore. "You're both dead to me," I spat, barely able to control my voice. "How long were you two planning this? How long was I in the dark, living a lie?" Emma looked away, unable to meet my gaze, and Mark, he just shrugged, as if it didn't matter. The man I had considered a brother was standing there, casually dismissing the damage he had done to my life. That was it. There was no going back from this. I could feel everything inside me break apart. The trust, the love, the respect. Everything we had built was gone in an instant, shattered by the very people I had thought I could rely on. The silence in the room after I yelled at them was suffocating. I couldn't even bring myself to look at Emma or Mark anymore. Every word they said felt like a betrayal all over again, and it hurt more than I could express. How could I ever go back to the life we had, the life I had trusted so deeply? It was impossible. I turned and walked out without saying another word. The door slammed behind me, but even that couldn't drown out the sound of my heart breaking. Outside, the air felt cold against my skin, but I barely noticed. My mind was racing, replaying everything over and over again. The life I had built, the trust I had given them both. How could it all have been so easily destroyed? I spent the next few days in a haze, trying to process everything. I called in sick to work, avoided my friends, and stayed in the apartment we had shared, surrounded by the things that reminded me of a love I once thought was real. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became, but I also felt a profound sadness. How had things come to this? How had I let them get so far without realizing? I couldn't get the image of them together out of my head, the way Mark had touched her, the way they had looked at each other. It wasn't just an affair, it was a complete betrayal of everything I had believed in. And the worst part was how easily they both seemed to accept it. There was no remorse, no apology, just empty words and broken promises. Emma eventually texted me, begging for a chance to talk. She said she was sorry that she loved me, that she never meant for it to go this far. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. What was there left to say? How could I ever look at her the same way again? How could I ever believe anything she said? As the days passed, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just empty. The love I once had for her was gone. And what was left was the painful knowledge that the woman I had trusted the most had shattered everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and commitment. It had been 2 weeks since the confrontation, 2 weeks since everything in my life had turned upside down. The pain hadn't gone away, but it was starting to feel more like an old wound, still there, but less raw, less immediate. I had spent those 2 weeks focusing on one thing, getting away from it all. I moved out of our shared apartment and found a new place. I didn't want any reminders of Emma, of the life we had planned together, but despite all my efforts to move forward, a part of me kept going back to that night. The moment when I caught them. The moment when I realized that everything I had worked for, everything I had trusted, was a lie. I couldn't help but replay the scene in my head, her face, her hesitation, Mark's cold, indifferent expression. One evening, I found myself standing in front of the restaurant where it all started, Mission Ranch. It was a place Emma and I used to visit often, a place that held so many good memories. But now it felt like a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. I had no intention of going in. I just needed to see it one last time to close that chapter of my life. As I stood there, looking at the restaurant's dim lights, I got a text from Emma. It was simple, just a few words. "Can we talk?" For a moment I just stared at the screen, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to tell her that she had no right to contact me, that she had ruined everything. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the good times we had shared, wanted closure. I wanted to hear her say something, anything, that could explain why she did it. Maybe it was a foolish hope, but I needed to hear it from her. I agreed to meet her the next day, but when we sat across from each other in a small cafe, I was struck by how much she had changed. The confident woman I had once known seemed small, fragile. Her eyes were red, her face tired. She apologized over and over again, saying that she was sorry for everything, for betraying me, for hurting me. But the more she spoke, the more I realized something. No apology would ever be enough. I asked her the question that had been haunting me since the night I found her with Mark. Why? It wasn't about the affair anymore. It was about everything. Why had she done it? What had gone wrong? Her answer was as empty as the apology she had given. "I don't know. I got lost. I didn't mean for it to go this far." She said the words, but they felt hollow, like she was just trying to fill the silence with something, anything. In that moment, I realized something I had been avoiding. I didn't need an explanation. I didn't need her to tell me why. What I needed was to let go, to stop holding on to the hope that things could be fixed. I needed to find my own closure. I stood up and left the cafe without another word. It wasn't a dramatic exit, just the quiet end to a chapter that had once seemed so full of promise. As I walked out, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from answers. It was the kind that comes from letting go. It's been months since that day. The days of heartbreak, confusion, and anger feel like they belong to someone else now, someone I don't recognize. The man who stood in that cafe asking Emma why is no longer the same person. He's gone, replaced by someone who has learned, in the hardest way possible, that sometimes letting go is the only way forward. I didn't reach out to Emma again after that meeting. She sent a few texts, trying to explain, trying to apologize, but I couldn't bring myself to reply. There were no more questions, no more words. Just silence. And in that silence, I began to rebuild. I spent time focusing on myself, on healing, on rediscovering who I was without the weight of that betrayal hanging over me. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I still thought about what could have been, what I lost, but those thoughts grew further apart with each passing day. I made new connections, reconnected with old friends, and started focusing on the things that once brought me joy, things I had forgotten in the blur of marriage, work, and life. One day, I woke up and realized that I no longer carried the anger with me. It wasn't a decision I had consciously made, but somewhere along the way, I had forgiven. Not because Emma deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I had spent too much time letting her actions define me, letting the past control my future. And I was done with that. Moving on didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't without its challenges, but I started to see life differently. I saw it as a journey, not just a series of destinations. I saw the beauty in the small things, the morning sun, a good book, a quiet walk. And slowly I found a new purpose in life. I realized that while Emma had been a chapter in my story, she wasn't the whole book. I still think about her sometimes. I wonder how she's doing, if she's happy. But I've learned not to seek those answers. The truth is, I don't need to know. I'm not the person I was when I first found out, and I'm proud of that. And so life moves on. I've moved on. With time, I've learned that no one has the power to control your peace except you. The strength to walk away, to leave behind the things that don't serve you, is something I will carry with me for the rest of my life.